The question hangs in the humid New Orleans air, even after a century. Was the Axeman insane? A creature of pure, random chaos? Or was he something else? Something colder, more deliberate? A calculated killer who knew exactly what he was doing. To figure it out, you have to look past the blood and the sensational headlines. You have to look at the patterns, the victims, and most of all, you have to listen to the jazz. It started in the spring of 1918. The world was at war, but in New Orleans, a different kind of war was beginning. It was a war on sleep. A war on the feeling of safety in your own home. The first victims were Joseph and Catherine Maggio. They were Italian grocers. They lived in a small apartment at the back of their shop. In the early hours of May 23rd, Joseph's brothers came to check on him. The door was locked. They got a bad feeling. They forced their way in. What they found was a nightmare. Joseph was dead in his bed. His skull was crushed. His throat had been cut with a straight razor. Catherine was nearby, her throat cut so deeply she was almost decapitated. Blood was everywhere. The police arrived and started looking around. They found the murder weapon, a bloody axe, left casually in the bathroom. It belonged to the Maggios. The killer had used their own tool against them. The straight razor, also belonging to the victims, had been cleaned and put away. That was a strange detail. A killer who slaughters two people but takes the time to clean one of the weapons. The entry was also strange. The killer hadn't broken down the door or smashed a window. He had chiseled away a lower panel of the back door, just big enough to squeeze through. It was quiet. It was patient. This wasn't the work of someone in a blind rage. This took time and effort. Robbery didn't seem to be the motive. Money and valuables were left untouched. Nothing was stolen. So why? The police were stumped. The city was scared. This first attack gives you both sides of the coin right away. The scene itself was pure carnage, a frenzy. It screams insanity. The level of violence was far beyond what was needed to kill. It's personal, it was overkill. This points to a killer lost in a storm of rage, someone not in control of their actions. They're a madman. But then you have the other details, the chiseled panel, the quiet entry, the use of the victim's own axe, the cleaned razor. These things suggest planning. They suggest a mind that is working, not just exploding. A calculated killer wants to control the scene. He wants to leave a message. Leaving the axe behind, his signature weapon, was a message. Chiseling the door was a method, a ritual. It wasn't random. It was his way of doing things. A month later, it happened again. Louis Bessumer and his mistress, Harriet Lowe, were attacked in their home, which was also behind a grocery store. The setup was almost identical. The lower panel of the back door was chiseled out. An axe, this one belonging to Bessumer, was left bloody in the kitchen. Both had been attacked in their sleep. Bessumer was struck in the head, but survived. Lowe was hit in the face and was in critical condition. Before she died, Harriet Lowe gave the police a description. She said a dark, heavy-set man had attacked them. She also at one point accused Louis Bessumer himself. The police were confused. Her story changed. But the MO was undeniable. It was the same person. The Axeman, as the paper started to call him, had struck again. The lack of robbery was the same too. This wasn't about money, it was about the act itself. The city's fear grew. Who were these victims? Italian grocers, the Maggios. Bessumer, while not Italian, ran a grocery. This started to look less random. Was there a connection? The police thought so. They started looking into business rivalries, the Black Hand, a kind of early mafia that preyed on Italian immigrants. Maybe this wasn't insanity at all. Maybe it was business. A very, very bloody kind of business. Then, in August, the Axeman changed his pattern slightly. He attacked a woman named Mrs. Schneider. She wasn't an Italian grocer, she was a young pregnant woman. She woke up in the night to a dark figure standing over her. He struck her in the face with a lamp, then bashed her head repeatedly. She survived, and so did her baby, born just a few days later. The weapon this time wasn't an axe, but the method of entry was familiar, a chiseled door panel. The killer seemed to be evolving, but his signature was still there. Attacking a pregnant woman, however, added a new layer of horror. It felt deeply pathological. It was an act so devoid of empathy that it pushed the argument back toward insanity. What sane, calculated person does that? Just a few days after the attack on Mrs. Schneider, he struck again. Joseph Romano, an elderly man. He lived with his two nieces. They heard a commotion in his room. They rushed in to see a heavy-set man fleeing the scene. Romano was on the floor, his head split open. He died shortly after. The killer had, once again, chiseled a panel on the back door. He had used an axe. The pattern was back. And the victim? While not a grocer, he was Italian. The pattern of attacking Italian Americans was becoming too strong to ignore. This is a huge point for the calculated argument. A truly insane, disorganized killer often strikes at random. Their victims are chosen by chance, by opportunity. The Axemen seem to be targeting a specific community. This suggests a motive. It could be racial hatred. It could be a vendetta. It could be a criminal enterprise enforcing its will. Whatever it was a choice. And choice is the opposite of random chaos. Think about the killer's mindset. He's moving through the city at night. He's selecting his victims. He's bringing a chisel with him. He's spending time, maybe 10, 15 minutes, patiently and quietly working on a door panel, all while people are sleeping just feet away. This is not the behavior of someone out of their mind with rage. This is the behavior of a predator. Being a hunter, he is calm. He is focused. The rage, the insanity, is unleashed only after he's inside. It's a tool he uses to kill and to terrorize. The fall of 1918 was the Axeman's bloodiest season. In October, he committed what many consider his most terrible crime. He broke into the home of the Cortimiglia family. They were, you guessed it, Italian grocers. He attacked Charles Cortimiglia, his wife Rosie, and their 2-year-old daughter, Mary. All were struck with an axe. Charles and Rosie were severely injured, but survived. Little Mary did not. She was killed instantly. This is the moment where the insane theory feels most powerful. The murder of a child. It's a line that most people, even most criminals, will not cross. In fact, it seems to serve no purpose. It's an act of pure evil, of a mind completely broken from humanity. The public was horrified. The police were desperate. How do you catch a monster who would do this? The act itself seems so deranged, so far beyond reason, that it's easy to label him a madman and leave it at that. But even here, in this most horrific act, there are signs of calculation. The method was the same. The chiseled panel, the axe from the woodshed, the focus on an Italian family. The purpose might not have been just to kill. The purpose might have been to create maximum terror. A calculated killer, especially one trying to send a message to a community, knows that killing a child is the ultimate act of terror. It says no one is safe, not even your babies. It's a psychological weapon. It's horrifying, but it isn't necessarily random. It could be the coldest, most calculated move of all. After the Cortimiglia attack, the Axeman went quiet for a few months. The city held its breath. Maybe he was gone, maybe he was dead or in jail for something else, but then in March of 1919, he came back. And this time, he didn't just bring an axe, he brought a letter. This is the part of the story that everyone remembers. The Jazz Ultimatum, a letter, supposedly from the Axeman himself, was sent to the city's newspapers. It was published for all to read, and it is, without a doubt, one of the strangest documents in the history of crime. The letter begins with a grand, almost cartoonish boast. Esteemed mortal, it starts. They have never caught me, and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible even as the ether that surrounds your earth. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. Right away, this sounds like the rambling of a lunatic. A man with a god complex. He claims to be a demon. He talks about being invisible. These are classic signs of psychosis, of someone who has lost touch with reality. He's not just a killer in his mind, he's a supernatural force. This is exhibit A for the insane argument. He goes on to mock the police, calling them foolish. He says he could kill thousands if he wanted to, but he holds back because of his sense of humor. He claims he is close friends with the Angel of Death. It's all very theatrical. It's the kind of thing you'd expect from a comic book villain, not a real-life killer. But then comes the ultimatum. The reason for the letter, he names a specific date the following Tuesday night, March 19th. And he makes a very strange promise. At 12:15 earthly time on next Tuesday night, he writes, I'm going to pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I am going to make a little proposition to you people. Here it is, I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the lower regions that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned. He continues, if you have a jazz band going, well then, so much the better for you. One thing is certain, and that is that some of your people who do not jazz it on Tuesday night, if there be any, will get the axe. This is where the argument shifts dramatically. Is this the proposal of a madman? Or is it the masterpiece of a calculated manipulative genius? Let's look at it from the insane perspective first. A killer who spares people based on their musical choices. It's absurd. It fits the profile of someone with bizarre, nonsensical rules governing their behavior. A mind that has created its own twisted logic where jazz music can ward off a demon. It's completely irrational. But now, look at it from the calculated perspective. What does this letter actually achieve? First, it creates mass panic and hysteria on a scale he couldn't achieve with just his attacks. He's no longer just a bogeyman hiding in the shadows. He's a public figure. He's communicating with the entire city. He's controlling the narrative. Second, he's toying with people. He's turning his reign of terror into a game, a performance. He's the director, and the citizens of New Orleans are his actors. He's making an entire city dance to his tune, literally. It's an incredible display of power and arrogance. And third, and perhaps most brilliantly, he's creating the perfect cover for his next crime. On that Tuesday night, the city of New Orleans exploded with music. Every home that could, every dance hall, every bar was filled with the sound of jazz. People who didn't even like jazz were playing it, they were playing for their lives. The city was a wall of sound. Amidst that city-wide party, who would hear a chisel on a door panel? Who would hear a scream? The noise would cover his movements, his entry, his escape. He could be anywhere, and the city's own celebration would be his accomplice. And what happened on that Tuesday night? Nothing. The Axeman didn't attack anyone. The city played jazz, and the demon passed them by. Was it because everyone played jazz? Or was that the point all along? The letter wasn't a genuine offer from a music-loving demon. It was the ultimate act of psychological warfare. It was a victory lap. He had proven he could make the entire city do whatever he wanted. He had terrorized them, and then he made them throw a party in his honor. He fed his ego. He reveled in the fear he created. That's not insanity. That's a profound and terrifying form of control. It's the work of a sadist, a narcissist, a psychopath. These are personality disorders, to be sure, but they are not the same as being legally insane, of not knowing right from wrong. A psychopath knows exactly what they're doing. They just don't care about the consequences for others. The letter, more than any axe blow, points to a calculated mind. A mind that understood people. A mind that understood fear. A mind that knew how to manipulate a whole population. He created a persona, the jazz-loving demon strategy, and used it to perfection. The persona was his disguise, and it was far more effective than any mask. It made people think he was a random supernatural force, when in all likelihood, he was just a man. A very clever, very evil man. After the jazz stunt, the attacks continued, but they became more sporadic. He attacked Steve Bocca, another Italian grocer, in August. In September, he attacked Sarah Lahman, a young woman who wasn't Italian. He seemed to be breaking his own pattern again, perhaps, to throw the police off. Or perhaps his original motive was resolving, and now he was just killing for the thrill of it. The final confirmed attack came in October 1919. Mike Pepitone, another Italian, was killed in his bed. His wife, who was sleeping in the same room, saw two men run from the house. This was a new detail. An accomplice? Or was she mistaken in the dark and the panic? Either way, the scene was familiar. Her husband was dead, his head crushed. And then, after the murder of Mike Pepitone, the Axeman of New Orleans vanished. The attacks just stopped. So what happened? Who was he? The police never solved the case. No one was ever convicted. But there's a very strong suspect, a man who fits the calculated theory almost perfectly. His name was Joseph Monfrey. Years earlier, in 1911, Monfrey had been shot and killed in Los Angeles. The woman who shot him, she was the widow of Mike Pepitone, the Axeman's last victim. She claimed Monfrey was the man who had murdered her husband. She also claimed he was a leader in a criminal organization, a black hand extortion racket that targeted Italian grocers in New Orleans. According to this theory, the Axeman wasn't a lone insane killer. He was a gangster. The murders were punishments for grocers who refused to pay protection money. This theory ties up a lot of loose ends. It explains the focus on Italian grocers. It explains the lack of robbery as a motive. The motive was terror and enforcement. It explains why the killings stopped after Mike Pepitone's murder. If Monfrey was the Axeman and he left New Orleans for Los Angeles after that final murder, the attacks would naturally cease. His death in LA would have permanently ended the threat. It paints a picture not of a madman but of a professional killer. A cold, ruthless enforcer. The extreme violence wasn't a sign of lost control, but a deliberate tactic to frighten other grocers into paying. Killing a child, as horrific as it was, would have been the ultimate message: pay us, or this will happen to your family. But what about the jazz letter? What about the demon from hell? How does a gangster fit with that? Perfectly. It was a brilliant piece of misdirection, a smokescreen. If the Italian community believed the killer was a supernatural lunatic, they would be less likely to suspect a criminal organization they already knew and feared. It deflected suspicion from the real motive. It turned a series of targeted assassinations into a citywide horror show, with the Axeman as the star. It was a performance designed to hide the very calculated, very human motive of greed and power. So, when you put it all together, which side wins? Insane or calculated? The evidence for insanity is mostly emotional. The sheer brutality of the crimes feels insane. The attack on a child feels insane. The letter on its surface reads like the work of a madman. It's easy to look at the bloody axe and the crushed skulls and conclude that no sane person could do such a thing. But the evidence for a calculated killer is logical. It's based on patterns and choices. The consistent MO, the chiseled panel, the victim's own weapon, the targeted victimology, primarily Italian grocers, the timing and patience of his entries, the clean escapes, the way he was never ever caught. And most of all, the jazz letter, an act of mass manipulation so audacious and effective that it screams intelligence, not psychosis. He wasn't out of control. He was in total control. Control of himself, control of the crime scenes, and for one night in March, control of an entire city. He likely wasn't insane in the way we usually think of it, a person detached from reality, unable to understand their actions. He was almost certainly a psychopath, a person with no empathy, no conscience, who saw other human beings as objects to be used or destroyed for his own purposes. To a psychopath, a brutal murder can be a tool. Terror can be a strategy. A letter from a demon can be a clever lie. The insanity was a mask he wore. It was the character he played. The Axeman of New Orleans wasn't a monster who came out of a nightmare. He was worse. He was a man who chose to become a monster. He built his own legend out of blood and fear. He used the appearance of madness to hide his very rational, very evil goals. He knew exactly what he was doing. Every chiseled panel, every axe swing, every word of that infamous letter was a choice. A calculated one. He wanted to be a demon, and for a year and a half, in the city that gave birth to jazz, he played the part perfectly.